Hey guys, I'm Jamie Dawson, and the module this week is the universal design for learning, the academic, the exceptionalities, the social and the intellectual characteristics for children. So what I'm going to start with is universal design for learning, so we kind of have a good understanding of what that is as I talk about the rest of the characteristics. So the UDL, which is the universal design of learning, classrooms are more diverse than ever. And so we need to be sure that we have a curriculum that is established for each student. Diversity is great. We need it. In a bunch of cultures and nationalities and genders and races of all different kinds are starting to intermingle, and that's great. But we need to have a curriculum that is going to be well established for each of those students. For all your students in one, but it needs to also be individualized in a certain way, if that makes sense. And so the UDL, it minimizes barriers and it maximizes the learning. So it excels in the learning. You're going to have less hoops to jump through, and your kids are going to get more out of the learning process, which is what they need. They need to gain more knowledge. And so under the learning portion, your brain has three different networks. It has recognition, skills and strategizing, and prioritizing. You can have a simple math problem of 2 plus 2. Okay, your brain recognizes 2 plus 2 is 4. How's it going to strategize the way to get it? And then prioritizing, for say you had to put on a number line, is it the priority to put on number 1 or is the priority to put on the last? What priorities come first in your mind? And then for design, while you need to have an established curriculum, you also need to be a little bit flexible in your curriculum, like I said, for those diverse students that aren't quite on that level yet. So like I said, it needs to be well established, but you also need to be a little flexible for those that may not quite fit yet. And so another thing you need to do is find goals for your students. Have your students set goals, and what is their goal by the end of your class year? What do they want to know? Where do they want to be on a skill level? Where do they want to be on an intellectual level? And so they need to set goals, and you guys need to kind of try to meet those goals. And you need to give choices. Choices are very important because not everybody's going to learn the same. So you may have somebody that likes to do a fill in the blank test, but then you might have somebody that likes to put in the bubble test. And so while that's all fitting still in your curriculum, you need to give those choices to those students. Maybe not those particular choices, but you need to give choices. That's all part of the UDL that it tells us, to make sure that students have options, because students will not all learn the same. And so for the social characteristics, gender, race, social class, and for the social traits, what kind of attitude do you have towards other people and their belongings? So, say I don't have a whole lot, and then Johnny John over here has buku's amounts of money, he's rich, blah, blah, blah. How is he going to act towards me in my belongings? Is he going to say, oh, sorry, that's $10, mine was $100? How are you going to act towards those people? And that's just kind of the way it is, and that kind of falls in the social class when it comes to the money and the standards of where you're at in society, for economics too. And so the next one I had put was cognitive, and it's the thought process, remembering, problem solving, decision making. What do you remember from this? This is a problem, so how are we going to fix it? And then decision making. Is that going to be the best decision I could make for myself or for others? And so that all kind of falls into the cognitive process. Excuse me. And so it is also how a person thinks, perceives, and gains understanding through a genetic learned factors. So genetic is something you can't help. Your mom and dad got married. Your mom and dad had you as a child. That's something you can't help. Genetic is genetic. You're 50% of your mom, you're 50% of your dad. But what you can help is your learned factors. Growing up, you may just per se, you learn to be rude and disrespectful. That's a learned behavior. That's a learned factor, but you do not have to be that way. And so you've got to train your brain to think otherwise. If you know it's wrong and you know you shouldn't be doing it, you're going to have to, although it's a learned behavior and a learned factor, you have the power to control that. And that's kind of what it tells us, that we have the power to control of how we think. Nobody else can think for us. You think for yourself, and if you think that's fine, you think that's great, well, that's a choice that you make. But if you know it's wrong and you have a conscience, well, then you can do different. And so the next on the list was intellectual characteristics. And so it's having a rational control of one's values, beliefs, interferences. How do they, you got to think rational. You may be a Democrat and I may be a Republican. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just saying you got to be rational about it. You can't humiliate a person because they're a Democrat and you're a Republican and they wanted Hillary to win and you wanted Trump to win. Well, Hillary didn't win, so you don't have to humiliate the person. You have to have a conscience of the limits that you go to. And so that's where the humiliation falls under, is conscious of limits. You don't have to make a person feel bad or feel embarrassed. That's not the way that works. So there's the difference between humiliation and courage. Courage is having the courage to face and address beliefs and viewpoints, even with negative emotions. I may not agree that you're a Democrat, and I'm going to have the courage to say, here's kind of what I think, without disrespecting you, without making fun of you, without poking at you. That's the difference. Is you can tell me your opinion, I can tell you you can tell me your opinion, I can tell you my opinion. Without mocking each other, being embarrassed, or laughing at one another. It's a simple adult conversation. And that's the way that intellectual kind of works. You have a rational control of one's beliefs and values and interferences. And you need to be respectful of those. And that seems to be a lot of things that we're lacking these days, is people just aren't respectful of how somebody else feels just because they don't agree. And that is not right either. So the next one is the academic characteristics. So there are 7 categories. There's the learning process. How are your students learning? How are you going to let them learn? How are you going to teach them? And then you have productive behaviors. What are they doing to be productive in class? What are they going to be doing to be productive in society? So how are we going to go about those things? And then you have growth mindset. Are they on a 3rd grade level, 4th grade level, 5th grade level being in a 4th grade class, or are they in a 3rd grade level being on a 4th grade class? That's just something that's going to have to be detected from an early stage. How their mindset is going to work as they grow and as how they go further in school. How are they going to keep up with their class? If they're ahead of their class, they're ahead of the class. If they're behind on the intellectual portion of it, on the way they learn, the way they think, are they an IEP kid or are they not an IEP kid? How are we going to try to keep them up the best we can with their class, with them still being able to understand what in the world we're talking about? Because you cannot leave, we have a No Child Left Behind, but that may be the case, but you cannot leave those children behind as far as learning just because there is a No Child Left Behind. Don't put them in a corner because they're not going to understand as much as the next student. They still need to have the opportunities to learn just like everybody else. And then you have the academic mindset. So where are they academically? It kind of goes with the growth mindset. Are they growing with their class? Are they accelerating with their class? Or are they a little further behind their class? Academically, where are they? And then we have learning strategies. So what can you do to teach them? They're all going to learn different. There's not going to be one person in that class that learns the same. It's just not going to happen. So what are you doing to help those children be different and excel for their learning? Are you going to give them options like we talked about in the UDL? Are you going to sit down with them one-on-one, or per se you have a para, have that para try to sit them down one-on-one, or with each person in the IEP in a group? And how are you going to get them to learn the best way effective? And so then we have effective learning skills. So what are they doing? What are you doing that's effective to help them learn? What are you helping them with that will give them a skill set that is effective? And then the social learning skills. We don't have children that are all well socialized. We just don't. So if they're not well socialized, what kind of skills are we going to give them to be socialized? How are we going to help them with that? It's not a teacher's job just to learn them some math and some reading. You're dealing with behavioral kids and social kids that are behind. We're going to have to learn how to handle those, and we're going to have to be there for those kinds of kids, and we're going to have to teach those kinds of kids. So it's something we need to go prepared into before we even think about entering the education field. Are you prepared to handle all of these types of kids? Because I just gave you 7 different categories, and for exceptionality, there's at least 8 different types. So are you going to be prepared as a teacher to handle that? and we need to be. And so the exceptionality identifies patterns of strengths in a common and needs common, it meets common needs to a group of students. So what are we doing that's helping these kids? So do you have a group of IEP kids? How are you meeting their needs as a common need? Or do you have kids that are, on the honor roll? How are you meeting their needs while having two different ends of the spectrum? What are you doing to meet in the middle for those kids? And so one type of on the list is ADHD. And in today's world, it seems like we're getting further and further behind on making sure our kids are well cared for. And so when it comes to ADHD, what are you doing to help those kids? Are you getting them, are they detected early? Are you getting them on medication if they need medication? Are you getting them, say, like a stress ball, for something to focus on? What are you doing to get those ADHD kids prepared for school? And what are teachers doing to prepare for ADHD kids? Do they have certain activities for them? Do they send them kind of off by themselves so they're focused better than looking around going, because they're so out there? What are we doing? And so then you have emotional and behavioral disorders. So for emotional and behavioral disorder, that's hard for me to accept, because as a child, you shouldn't have emotional disorders. At the school I work with, we have a lot of that. And a lot of it can be avoided, but it's not because of the parents. And so when you have a kid that's emotionally damaged in the 4th grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 2nd grade, whatever grade they're in, it makes me upset personally, because it's something that could be avoided. It's different if they have a loss of a dog, that's emotional. But when it's, the parents doing the destructive portion of it, then that upsets me. And then you have behavioral disorders, and a lot of those behavioral disorders come from the emotional disorders. So they're kind of intertwined. How are you going to take care of it? How are you going to fix it? Or help, not fix, I should say. And so then you have learning disabilities, kids with IEPs, or kids that may be great in math but a little slower in reading. How are we going to help those kids meet the goals of what they need to have by the end of the year, or according to your curriculum and the state laws? How are we going to help those kids with a little bit of learning disability? Are they a one-on-one, or do they just need certain minutes out of the day? That's something we got to figure out. And then we have intellectual and developmental disabilities. Developmental, are they on the same mindset as what they should be as an 11-year-old or a 4-year-old? Where are they at? Intellectual, the same thing. Where are they? And then you have speech and language disorder. That's something that you can help. Personally, where I work, we have a speech therapist that comes in every day. And so the kids that need a little help with speech get their help with speech. And, for as far as language, how are you going to help them understand what you're talking about, as far as, are they speaking English or are they speaking Russian? And then you have the autism spectrum disorder. Are they a high-functioning autistic child, or are they a low-functioning autistic child? Are they on the IQ level of genius, or are they down here, they're really smart and they're nonverbal, but they're considered low-functioning autistic because they're nonverbal? You got to detect those different types of autistic children. And then you have deafness and hearing loss. Deafness can be helped. Not deafness, but hearing loss can be helped with a hearing aid. How are they getting help? How are you helping them? As far as deafness, are you having to sign to them for them to understand? Are you doing special activities for them to understand? What are you doing? And then you have visual loss, so blindness. And so when it comes to blindness, there's a lot of schools that are not equipped, as far as public schools, to deal with the blind. This usually going to be a special school. So, but either way, even if they have vision loss, how are we helping those children? How are we going about to make that right for those children? And so that's just something that we need to figure out, like I said, as far as the curriculum, the way you're teaching, the way they're understanding, and the way they're perceiving. So it's all so different, but it's all connected. Wide variety, small circle. And we kind of got to figure it out as educators and how we're going to handle that. So I hope you enjoyed it this week. Thanks.